Welcome to all of you. We at the Global Climate Association are delighted to welcome Jennifer Janzen, the Visionary Executive Director of Alberta Tomorrow, hailing from Canada, to the Terra Torrent and Dialogue series, a part of Terra Confluence 2024 and Earth Day event series to mark the Earth Day this year. Jennifer has over 30 years of diverse experience in the field of education, ranging from being a high school biology teacher to an environmental consultant and environmental educator. Jennifer's leadership has been pivotal in utilizing the Alberta Tomorrow simulator, an innovative educational tool that empowers users to envision and plan sustainable futures for Alberta's landscapes. Her dedication to environmental education and her commitment to integrating sustainable land use practices have profoundly impacted both students and educators across Alberta. Jennifer's expertise in balancing ecological integrity with economic development through interactive learning will surely enrich our discussion on sustainable solutions. So, we warmly welcome you to our talk today, Jennifer, and we look forward to this discussion. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks for inviting me.
So, to start off with, I would like to ask something very simple, that is about Alberta Tomorrow's impact. Can you describe the core mission of Alberta Tomorrow and how the simulator has impacted environmental education and sustainable planning for Alberta?
So Alberta Tomorrow has, well, first of all, I'll start with our vision. Our vision is an informed society that actively fosters sustainable futures. And our mission then is to deliver a platform that empowers youth to design and sustain a future for our shared ecosystem. Now, that's a really wordy way of saying we develop software that allows students to time travel back to the year 1910, forward to the year 2050, and actually see on the satellite imagery how the landscape has changed and what the impact of that change has been, and what the impact of that change may be in the future, considering changes in, current land use, and also climate change.
That's great. What are the age groups, if I may say, if that is the tool is aimed at? Is it for school students higher than elementary, or it can be used by anyone?
Initially, when we developed Alberta Tomorrow, we thought probably about grade 7 to 12. That was our target audience. Then we quickly realized that the way Alberta's curriculum is set up, that there was a perfect fit with grade 4 students. So we have used it as young as grade 1, so 6-year-olds. We have a huge uptake of users from grades 4, and then all the way through to grade 11. And then in the last few years, we've noticed a lot of usage by post-secondary institutions also. So universities and colleges within Alberta and some of our neighboring provinces also.
Because that is actually great, because something to do with satellite data and to, time travel back and forth is what people in most of the nations study in their graduate programs or undergraduate programs. So to do it from like as early start as first grade is incredible, and then they can literally see what the changes have been over the years to make them more connected to the impacts. And one more thing, is it the simulator that is it focused on the Alberta region itself, or does it have some of the simulations for other parts of perhaps Canada as well?
So currently, Alberta Tomorrow is a project that is focused solely on Alberta. However, we've actually been around since 2003, and 3 years ago, we developed a BC Tomorrow, so our neighboring province to the west. So British Columbia has its own simulator, and we're in discussions to create Saskatchewan Tomorrow, so our neighbors to the east. And we actually have a landing page for Canada Tomorrow. We don't have all the other provinces developed yet, but our goal is to have one for each province in Canada.
That is amazing. And now, moving to the next question that we have. How does Alberta Tomorrow tailor its educational tools and outreach to engage different audiences, including K-12 and college students, in understanding sustainability? I say this because the understanding and needs for, like you said, first graders is very different from college students. So, is there a specific way you tailor these tools for each category of students that they are using it for?
So first of all, it's tailored directly to the curriculum, or in Alberta, we call it the program of studies. So lesson plans that we develop for grade fours focus on a slightly different aspect of the tool. They're still using the simulation technology and the GIS, but they may be focusing more on the landscape and some higher kind of, I shouldn't say the higher level concepts, but more simplistic concepts. Whereas when we get into using this, say in grade 11 biology class, they're still using the simulator. They're still looking at how the landscape changes affect our environmental indicators and our social economic indicators, but they may be looking at things in much more detail. So for example, trying to figure out why water quality has gone down, they may be looking specifically at the phosphorus biogeochemical cycle and talking about, increased algae growth and eutrophication. So I do find that I have some grade fours who are able to explain those concepts, but it's not really part of the grade four curriculum. Whereas in grade 11, they do need to know that. So, so in our lesson plans, we tailor it with different questions, looking at things in a little bit more detail as the age increases. We also use the simulator with other environmental organizations and other nonprofits. So then we would tailor it towards, if we're working with a citizen group that's concerned about planning for the future of their city, then we'll kind of tailor it more towards talking about maybe urban densification and how that's going to impact our future. So yeah, it really depends on the audience. The simulator itself doesn't have different sections for different grades, but we have incorporated some kind of gamification tools so that the younger students, grade four boys, love to try and beat their colleagues or their fellow students in terms of how many points they get. So then they're a little more concerned with completing some of the quests that are going to give them points, whereas the older students are there just to learn the material, really.
That is actually very interesting to put in a game element. Excites not even young students, it's not only just the young students, maybe the elder ones as well, to have a sense of competition to get to the quests and get them done. And also something interesting is the movement of Alberta Tomorrow from Alberta itself to British Columbia and Canada as a whole. So when you said in 2003, this was the time Alberta Tomorrow, uh, there was an inception for Alberta Tomorrow. Was there any particular reason that there was a need to have this? Was there a certain change in the landscape that caused the inception of Alberta Tomorrow? Could you explain?
Yeah, it was actually the brainchild of two people working at the University of Alberta, Dr. Brad Stelfox and his grad student, Matthew Carlson. And at the time, both of them were landscape ecologists, and they didn't think that regular everyday Albertans had a really good understanding of what was happening on the landscape. So Alberta is a very oil-rich province. We have benefited greatly from our natural resources, especially our oil and gas deposits. And we have tried to benefit from that resource. And we have greatly, but at the same time, not a lot of people were aware of maybe some of the drawbacks that come along with using that resource. And so Brad and Matt thought that we needed to have an educational tool that helped everyday people and students understand what's going on in the landscape, so that when governments, who of course are voted in on kind of 4-year cycles here, when they're putting forth policies that would support sustainable land use planning, that if people had enough background and knowledge in it, they would support some of those initiatives. So that's really how it all came about.
So I find that this tool not only has a educational setting or educational motive, but a uh, broader concept of including policy changes as well, or including the aspect of building the community with having the in mind that what is the current state of landscape and what it might be if we are not careful. So
Mhm.
I figure when you said there is the projections go on till 2050, so in the future we can see what if there are rapid, say, changes or making different infrastructure building is there, and what will the changes be to the landscape. Does it also include something related to the biodiversity, if there's any specific biodiversity associated to the region, and whether its number will go down or up based on the urbanizations or industrialization per se?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we don't address biodiversity specifically in the simulator, but we do talk about natural landscapes and how the area of natural landscapes has changed in the past and may change in the future, and how that impacts carbon sequestration and water quality and things like that. When we look at some of our natural regions in Alberta, and we have some 360 virtual tours of the natural regions, we talk a little bit about, which natural regions within Alberta have more biodiversity than others, and the importance of that biodiversity also.
That is great, actually. I was talking to another person during this series who is a naturalist and works with for wildlife conservation projects in India. And what she said struck with me, that she said that we need to have an education system where we are not forced to learn about the environment, or not forced to as a part of a curriculum and to just get grades, which is something that happens quite often in Asia and most of the countries probably. But it should be within us to understand nature and have that connect with the nature. And I think something like using these tools that you have been working on, these sort of tools may bring back those connect and the connection with the actual nature. Are there any the students, do they also have these virtual tours, and do they also include going to these places and see what the current status is? Because in remote sensing terms, there's something known as ground truthing. So we actually go to the ground and see what it says on the map. Does it
Yeah.
include something like that?
Um, Not led by us, but teachers certainly can do that as an extension of using the simulator. Very early on as an organization, we felt that we didn't want to be duplicating something that someone else was already doing. So for example, in my past, I have run field trips. I have done water sampling with students. We didn't want to replicate something that another nonprofit, another registered charity is already doing really well. what we wanted to do was complement what they're already doing. So we partner with some other organizations who do that kind of work in the ground truthing. And we encourage them to use and offer our tool to their teachers as kind of a pre and a post field trip experience. So before they go on their field trip, they can use the satellite imagery, they can use the simulations to understand how the land has changed. When they go out and do, say, water sampling for whether it be chemical tests or invertebrates that they're looking at, then they have an idea of what's happening presently. And then they can go back to their classroom and they can run future simulations and see, okay, well, what might happen to water quality if we do this? And that's going to affect those chemical tests that they actually saw on the ground. So we like to, I know a lot of people think that environmental education can only be done out on the land and outside. And I totally support getting kids outside and having people appreciate nature and know what's around them. But I just think that tools like Alberta Tomorrow can enhance that learning and make it even more powerful when you are out on the land, if you realize what it used to be like and what it is now. And also to give you that big picture when you're standing there on the land, you might not know that, 10 meters over there, there's a clear cut. You might not see it because all you can see is a forest. But if you look at the satellite imagery, you can see, oh my gosh, we're standing here and that whole area over there is a clear cut. And so it changes your perspective a little bit.
That is interesting to know, especially with satellite imagery, it opens your mind, especially if some students are, or maybe any learner who's interested into that aspect. Geography is very interesting and it changes with each city probably. So to see that on a computer screen or a simulation and then to go and test it would it enhances the experience multifold. And also something that was very beautiful when you said that you're complementing with other agencies. So I find this so often being done in the field of maybe environment and climate and many others, that each organization or each initiative have their own niche, and then you focus on your own work while complementing others, bringing it together, which generally creates a sense of friendship and maybe collaborative benefits are also there, where you can focus on your own work while letting other people do their thing, and then we have these interchanges between us.
Exactly.
That is like lovely to see that. Now, moving on to the next question that I had for you. What are the most significant challenges and also the opportunities you have observed in promoting sustainable land use planning through Alberta Tomorrow's initiatives, if there were any challenges and opportunities?
Well, I won't lie to you. Funding is always a challenge. We offer the simulator for free to students and teachers, and we want it to be available to everybody. We don't want, say, a school or classroom budget to be a barrier to it being used. But having said that, we always need to fundraise more so that we can pay for the servers and pay for, the different things that go into keeping it going and updating it, because data changes over time and technology changes over time too. We're actually in version 6 of Alberta Tomorrow and already thinking about what version 7 is going to look like. So we constantly need to keep up with technology, keep up with the expectations of students and technology, and keep it free and keep it running. So yeah, funding's always a big barrier, I would say.
That is true. It is in case of ours as well, when we, especially in terms of developing nations where we work in, and there are, I'm not sure what the classrooms provide for people in students in Canada, because for in India there are maybe just one computer present for the entire school to watch in most public schools that are. So if we have to run a program which has some interactive element to it, we need to only select those school which has the infrastructure for
Right.
for the information dissemination. Otherwise, we have to go into a lot of trouble to get those resources there. And that is also not in continuum. We can just go and, show them once, but what are they going to do tomorrow? They will not have that resource. So that is
Right.
funding, and infrastructure is always a problem all over the world, I assume. So, moving on to your something about the future envisioning that you have. How do you help students and educator visualize and plan for a sustainable future if you do that in your organization using the simulator? What specific outcomes do you aim to achieve with this tool?
Great question. One of the, I guess, specific outcomes we have is we want people to understand that we can't have everything everywhere all the time. And that we have to decide what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, why we're doing it, and recognize that there will be trade-offs. So here in Alberta, when we cut down forests in our forestry industry, there are benefits to that industry. People have jobs, people have money, they sell that lumber. We use that lumber to build schools and hospitals and homes. But the drawback of that industry is that we're taking away trees that are going to absorb more carbon and help us combat climate change. We sometimes increase erosion because we're taking trees off of mountainsides. We are losing wildlife habitat. Some wildlife depend on the old growth forests. And so we really want people to understand that there are benefits to our land uses and there are liabilities or drawbacks, and that we can't have everything all the time everywhere. So we have to make some really tough decisions, and we have to be willing to live with some trade-offs also. So for example, if a major city nearby me, Calgary, is going to keep growing, the trade-off is that we're going to lose some of the agricultural land that is around Calgary, because we can't have agriculture and cities and towns on the exact same piece of land. So the trade-off is maybe we won't have as much locally produced food. But then again, maybe we can have some rooftop gardens and maybe we can do other things, or technology will advance. But the trade-off is, what are we going to do with this piece of land if we're changing it into housing? We're taking it away from either being natural or being agricultural land or something else. So I think our main messages have always been, we need to balance our economic needs and our environmental needs. Everybody needs some money and food to eat, and if we're driving our cars or heating our homes, but at the same time, we need clean air and we need clean water and we need wild spaces. And what's going to happen with climate change? We need to be able to live without, drastic disasters happening all the time in the next 30, 40 years. So um, the main message, I guess, is finding that balance and recognizing that you might have to give something up to get something else. So the idea of trade-offs.
That is actually a lovely way to put it, that there needs to be a synergy between the price we pay and the benefits we get, especially if there is a ecological service which is not really marked with a which has a price on top of it. It's very difficult to understand the benefit and unless and until it's already gone. So maybe simulations and tools like this puts it into perspective what we might lose. And in
Mhm.
case of climate change that is happening rampantly all over the world, maybe those trade-offs are more skewed towards the negative impacts currently, but we need balance as well. So
Mhm.
we have to find for solutions that are more combining the both the development along with like you said, we can have more rooftop gardening gardens or some other way of including the biodiversity in our
Mhm.
developmental projects as well. So
Yeah. I think we all
that's
recognize that we can do things
yes.
better, can do things in a better way, and still get some of the things we want, but it takes change and a little bit more effort, maybe on our part or on industry's part, to make things better.
True, and we need to understand that it cannot be harsh way of putting our views, even though it might be the correct view for the right time. We have to understand what the uh, party is coming from and what are their benefits they are getting maybe and why are they focused on so much, and be more
Mhm.
inclusive to put all interests in it. It has to be the interest of the natural land. It has to be the considering a natural ecosystem as a living organism itself, also the inhabitants and the industries and anyone who's generating an income. So we have to look at a holistic picture to make a decision. That's
Yeah, for sure.
that. Moving on to the next question. Could you share some insights on how partnerships with educational institutions, government bodies, and industries maybe have facilitated Alberta Tomorrow's goals? Uh, how have these partnerships helped to
Yeah,
grow?
as I mentioned before, we try not to duplicate what somebody else is doing. So by developing our resource so that it can be used in conjunction with other organizations' resources, that also opens up our audience base also. There are some organizations that we work with that have a much larger draw. They have much larger budgets. They have, larger staff. And so by partnering with them, we can kind of piggyback on some of their outreach and expand our audience. So that's been a big one. Sometimes it helps to get some funding and, leverage in terms of funding. Um, we've had great success with at certain times in certain political atmospheres on getting some government funding. We do get funding from other private charities, from bigger corporations, from other foundations. So, variety of sources, and that's always a good thing too.
True. And also as the thing that you're working on is satellite imagery and land use, land cover information. So government may be coming in handy to provide that information, government bodies or other agencies, nodal agencies who provide that information. Because as I know, those are not cheap as well. They have a price because satellite imagery setting up and then processing, pre-processing all of them takes a lot of time and energy, also computer storage spaces. So you
Yeah,
need a big databases to store that. So that also might have been useful that was considered.
yeah.
Uh, moving on to the next questions, if I may proceed. What are some key lessons that you have learned over the years from developing and implementing the Alberta Tomorrow's simulated environmental education? And were you surprised to learn something specific that you never thought would correlate with the environment over the years?
I think one of our big learnings that I mentioned already was that students younger than we think can understand these concepts. And sometimes they understand them even better than older students do because they don't have all that kind of baggage or parental influence or peer influence. They soak it in the information and then they get it. And they don't have as much of a filter, I guess. But that's been a big learning. Another big learning that we've had is that, well, we can't be static. We have to be constantly changing and upgrading and getting better. And so I think, back in 2003 when they developed version 1, they thought, hey, we'll develop this, we'll put it on the internet and everybody will find it and use it and it'll be great. But I don't think they were thinking that within a few years we were going to have to, rejig the entire simulator. And another learning they had early on was just because you put something out there on the internet doesn't mean that people see it. So that whole promotion piece and making people aware was a big learning. Oh, there have been so many over the years. It's hard to pinpoint them.
Yeah, yeah, the both things that you said makes a lot of sense. First one is that children are aware it is just us restraining from giving them that information. So because
Mhm.
I was skeptical when you first said it goes on to from the first graders also understands this, and I was kind of confused that does that really happen? But when you put it like that, it makes a lot of sense that they do understand. It is just us we not giving them the information, and we should do that because they are
Mhm.
the main stakeholders in the future who are going to be in the facing the brunt of everything that is happening. It is our, we'll say, our duty to give them the relevant information as a shield to protect them also, and use as maybe a sort of a resource to use it in proper use it for the future.
Mhm.
So
It's
now
kind of cool. You have grade 4 students talking about GDP
hmm,
and how we can't stop all oil and gas production because what will happen to GDP? And it's this little 4-year-old, and it's pretty cool to hear them talk like that. So
that is amazing. I still don't get GTB, and when the student and the little kids do, that is amazing to understand,
yeah.
amazing to think of. And moving on, how do you see the role of technology, which you have already discussed, evolving in environmental education? And what future developments are you planning for the Alberta Tomorrow platform? This technology can be considering the sudden use and promotion of AI tools in this field. What do you, how do you see this evolving for Alberta Tomorrow?
Yeah. So we're not sure. AI is changing the way we do things so quickly. We've just recently brought on some young computer engineers. Um, I am not a gamer. I don't sit at home and play games. So I don't come to Alberta Tomorrow with all of these new ideas of what the technology can do. I'm going to rely on the younger ones to help me with that. But we do know that things will be changing and they'll be changing rapidly. And I hope that AI can actually help us make some of these things that in the past have been pretty um, labor intensive, like some of the digitizing that we've had to do or the data collection. Maybe things are going to get easier. Well, they already have. I mean, some of the work that we did 10, 15 years ago now can be done really quickly or is readily available from other sources that wasn't 15 years ago. So um, things are going to change and hopefully get easier to do at the same time and just make everything have that much more of an impact because we know that the simulation technology does have a big impact. It allows people to see things that just visualize things that they couldn't before. And I think it helps, it really helps people to understand, especially when you visualize into the future, what might happen. And if you don't like the future that you're seeing on the screen, then what are we going to do to change it? Because we can, we have the power to change what we're doing today to get a different future. And so this visualization of the future helps put it all into perspective, I think.
That is true. And especially when you say these labor-intensive tasks that we have. So my master's dissertation was on remote sensing tools and how I use them to study impact of a cyclone on a area of coastal India. And
Mhm.
during those times, I had to take the topographical sheets, and when they are digitized, to overlay it on a satellite imagery. It used to be very painstaking, and I had to spend like hours in one day, 16 hours, 17 hours to make those points sit on overlay on top of the others. And because I'm currently also involved in researching on AI and using remote sensing and climate change research, I found that those things that used to take 16, 15 hours for you continuous to do, these can be done immediately. You can just give them the stacks and they can just overlay your landscape into the topographical sheets and on the different layers of the satellite imagery, which makes it much easier to for the people who are working on that, so they can move on to the next task. Otherwise, it was very, I used to remember I had like, sleepless nights putting all those satellite imageries on exact point, because if you miss a single point, the thing goes away by the like 500 meter, or like maybe over that, more than a kilometer per se.
Yeah, yeah,
That was there. And also to say that there is it evolve means like there is evolution in technology every single day that is happening, maybe currently now more than ever, and it's making our tasks so much more easier to understand. And yes, having young blood in these groups who are gamers and who know this is always important in an organization to keep us upgraded and on the forefront.
yeah.
Moving on to the next question. So, as I saw, Alberta Tomorrow was more about sustainable practices and what are the changes. So, does it have a somewhat of a place for climate change education, or how does Alberta Tomorrow address the complexities of climate change in its curriculum and resources? If it doesn't at all, or has it any plans to do that in the future?
Yeah, no, we do. Just as the pandemic hit, we released our climate change module. And what the climate change module did is it took our business as usual scenarios into the future, and the plans that students can actually, their own future plans, and it overlays on it 3 different climate change scenarios. So if there's kind of a mild, medium, and hot climate change scenario, and you can see with your plan or with the business as usual plan, with the hot climate change scenario, what's the outcome going to be like in 30 years? And with the mild, what's the outcome going to be like? We also incorporated precipitation and climate graphs for the next 30 years. And of course, they're very variable from year to year, but you do see kind of the change, the trend over time. So we included that. We also have done some work on with glaciers. So I'm not sure if you're aware, but actually the UN has decided that the year 2025 is going to be the year of the glacier. And so we're actually working on doing some more glacier work, but just maybe a 2-hour drive west of me here is the Athabasca, the Columbia Ice Field, and the Athabasca Glacier. So as part of our climate change education, we went out on the glacier. We have videos walking around on the glacier, people talking about how much glacial ice is lost in 1 year, how it's changed over the past 10, 20, 30 years. We also went up to the University of Alberta Ice Core Lab, and we interviewed a glaciologist there who studies ice cores, and she has explained how she analyzes them for gases and analyzes the liquid for gases, and how she determines how climate has changed based on looking at these ice cores. So between the videos that we have, the lesson plans that go along with the videos, as well as the climate change 3 scenarios that allow you to run your exact simulation for the future with those 3 different scenarios and see the impact of strong mitigation, and really getting our greenhouse gases down, or we're not going to do too much about it and greenhouse gases really rise. See what the impact is on your own sustainable plan. And what's really cool is when you look at a larger study area. So if we looked at, say, the entire northern part of the province of Alberta, you can see how the landscape vegetation is going to change over time. You can see wetlands drying up and turning into grasslands, and you can see the forested areas kind of moving north. And you can see the southern parts of the province getting even drier and maybe not suitable for crops anymore. So those climate change scenarios allow students to actually see some of the change before their eyes too. And then of course, there's all the numbers that go along with it. So they can see the change, and then they can look at exactly how many hectares of wetland will disappear, and how much more grassland we're going to get in the northern part of the province, which should be all forested and wetland.
That actually brings the problem much closer to you when you have that some sort of a tool which tells you about your nearby location. Otherwise,
Mm.
if you hear that something is going to happen in Australia from Asia, and then if something is happening in like the droughts in Africa or the fires in US, then you don't really connect. But if there's something that brings the issues closer to home, that makes it so much more relatable, and also you are active to work on that. Also about the there is like the heat is going up. WMO this time declared that the years like the last 2 years, 2023 was the warmest of all years, and that trend continued to February 2024 as well. In Asia, in northern part of India, we are facing a lot of heat these days, sleepless nights due to the hot weather. That is another reason that I have been up at this hour. And this is continuing, and with the loss of ice and all, it is uh, I think the whatever predictions were made by the IPCC, it was dismissed in one point of time, but word by word everything is coming true what they predicted maybe in the 90s, the first IPCC one when the report came in. Now we are to the sixth report, and there is like a IPCC also has a very interactive atlas. I don't know if you're aware of that or if you are. They have
Yeah.
this atlas with a lot of scenarios and interactive simulations for past and present, or with different climatological parameters. So
Mhm.
I'm sure that you have incorporated some of their things into your work as well.
Yeah. And you did raise a really good point too. I was a little bit um it was hard to talk to students in Alberta, which is a totally landlocked province, about polar bears or, ocean level rise, because students didn't see it all the time. But when you start talking about climate change, and some of our videos talk about increased forest fires and the melting glaciers, and still not everyone in Alberta gets to walk on a glacier. But I'm sure that every student in Alberta, either last summer or the summer before, was forced to stay inside during the summer because the forest fires and the air quality was so bad that you weren't supposed to go outside, say, and exercise in the outdoors. And so when people start to realize that those are impacts of climate change, and that's affecting them for days on end, it maybe sinks in a little bit more than oh, sea level's gonna rise, but we don't have a we don't have a coast right here, so it doesn't really, we don't see it happening. It's
That
easier
is,
to ignore it if you don't see it, right?
yes, that is true. So education has to be, in terms of education also, it has to be very close to home. We have to tailor, we have to go away from the mentality we just give them something, they read it, and then they don't use it in their life. It has to be
Yeah.
very personal. We have to have that connect with the not just environment or go out in the nature, but the issues at hand. It can be social issues, it can be environmental stress that they are facing, basically understanding their microclimate. So my PhD was on thunderstorm modelings in a eastern part of India, where that region is very much prone to lightning strikes, and people die from those a lot. So that sort of a connect was there, because I have seen those things happening, and I was pretty scared of thunderstorms. To work on that gave me that information, and also to have that knowledge somewhat empowers you to understand the situation, and the fear goes away, and you think of solutions. Okay, what can be done if this happens in your area? And then
Yeah.
you want to pass that on to the next generation as well, so that they are not clueless of, if something suddenly happens to them in and around, to the climate or to the environment, they're aware, okay, this is happening, and so we can take such and such steps. And that having a simulator which gives you those scenarios in the future equips you so much more. It gives you the power to understand the future and take those actions from a young
Mhm.
age. uh,
Mhm. Mm.
there will be just I'll move on towards a couple of last questions that I have for you. uh, Can you discuss any specific conservation efforts if you made, or projects that have been particularly successful or impactful through Alberta Tomorrow's educational programs? I remember you earlier telling that it was not really specifically related to biodiversity, but did it have any impact at all on the local, say, biodiversity or something?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we try and just complement other people's programs. And so we have had a number of collaborations with some of the high schools in the area where they use Alberta Tomorrow as part of a greater kind of conservation effort. So I know that a few years ago, one of the grade 11 classes was working out on a native prairie and helping to well, replant and protect a riparian area so that the cattle didn't just trample it and destroy it. So they were putting in fencing and they were doing replanting and things like that. So although Alberta Tomorrow doesn't lead those initiatives, we kind of leave those to the other groups who are on the ground and already doing that kind of thing. So we just hope to kind of complement them.
That is interesting to know. And it is also helpful when you can share your resources. Does Alberta Tomorrow do that? Maybe perhaps share those scenarios to other groups who are specifically working on those aspects, and to help them understand what can happen, so they can, cater their own conservation projects or whatever their initiatives might be. Is
Yeah.
there?
And even we've had, the city of Calgary, which is a city of 1 million people. We've had people from their administration use Alberta Tomorrow as an educational planning tool. So we're not, they're thinking about their future and how the city should grow. And they're not using it as the exact planning tool, but they're using it as the educational tool to help people understand why they need to do some planning for the future. So yeah, lots of examples of things like that.
That is actually great to have something at hand. You can actually plan your future, not just for maybe educational purposes. It can be city planning. It can even be a small shop that was planning to work in a certain way, but they saw your simulator, so they can make some changes for their growth in the future. So, to the
Mhm.
last question that I have for you today, uh, How does Alberta Tomorrow enhance climate and environmental awareness through its educational program? This is part one of the question. And are there any plans to expand the scope or reach of the project beyond Alberta, which you already discussed earlier within the nation, but also internationally? Is there
Mm.
any, are there any plans to do that?
Um, so I think the strongest value of Alberta Tomorrow is the fact that it allows students to visualize what's either happened in the past or in the future. So, you know, I like to promote it to the younger students as a time traveling tool because we really are time traveling and seeing what's happened. But students aside, for anybody who sees the simulations, they're able to visualize what the future might be and understand then if they make a change in their land use plan and then simulate the future, what might happen to water quality and what happens to the amount of agricultural area we have or natural landscapes. And it not only does it help them to understand what needs to change for the future, it also helps them understand how much you need to change on the land to change those indicators. So for example, if you want water quality to get better, well, you have to put in a lot more natural areas and use beneficial management practices for agriculture so that we're being really careful we're not putting too much agriculture or too much fertilizer on the land. And so when you combine those things, then they can see the impact in the future. But just making one small little change on, having one more hectare of natural landscapes is not going to impact water quality in a huge way. If you want water quality to get better, you need to make some big changes. So I think that's kind of the biggest impact that Alberta Tomorrow has is being able to visualize these things, and visualize climate change and how that might impact our future also. And yes, in terms of expansion, in the past, we have had actually some interest from an organization in India. We've had interest from organizations in Australia, in Alaska, and we would love to have simulators for other areas as well. And as I mentioned, we want Canada Tomorrow to be a reality, so we have one for each province also and territory. Um, but guess what it comes down to all the time? If you have the money, we can create a simulator that will show the land use change and what the impact of that land use change is. But that the funding always is kind of
Issue.
the issue in the end. Yeah.
And what sort of, if an organization per se wants to, or maybe an educational institute from different parts of the world want to do that, connect with you, what sort of resources like, land use information or something like that would be required for them to make this easier for you to simulate? Is there any specific requirements that they'll need to give the
Um,
right?
yeah, well, we need some data and we need some imagery, basically. And then everything that is in Alberta Tomorrow is based on research and data. So um, we have some great landscape ecologists who look at the data. They go through all of the research and figure out how to calculate the change. So all of our dials are based on, equations, and they come up with those equations to show that if you add this much forest, how is that going to change, say, biotic carbon storage? They're the ones that come up with that information. So the data needs to be out there, the research needs to be out there, and then we really just need someone to we just need to be able to put it together and narrow down what the really important things are. Because let's be honest, Alberta Tomorrow looks at 3 different land uses: agriculture, forestry, and oil and gas production. There are many more activities on the landscape. And then we look at water quality and wild fish habitat and natural landscapes. We could look at many other factors also. So what we've done is we've tried to simplify it a little bit to the indicators that we have and make it easier for people to understand, because in the end, it is an educational tool. There are other simulators that are professionally used that look at, maybe 20 or 30 different indicators, but our goal is for people to understand the process and the need for sustainable planning.
That is true, because if there are professional tools, which we are aware of many, there are companies actually doing that on a multinational level where they have this important information and they are number crunching and doing everything. And this is already out there. But for educational purposes, it has to be simple. It has to be tailored to the locale where the students are, and also it has to have the information simplified for everyone to understand what it means and how to exactly calculate it. So
Yeah.
that is something I think Alberta is tomorrow is doing a great job of this making this happen with this tool, and hopefully the students and anyone who's learning through your tools can make an impactful change in their lives and their communities using that tool. With that note,
Mhm.
I would like to thank you so much for being a part of this conversation today. And we look forward to have a more collaborative approach in the future as well. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for talking to me
Thanks
on.
for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.